Derek Steinberg leaned back in his leather chair, a smug expression spreading across his face as he delivered the words that would change everything. For 11 years, I approved every wire above 14 million through your father's treasury system. Now you're firing me because your buddy wants my chair. I asked, my voice steady, despite the rage building inside me. His response came without hesitation, dripping with the arrogance that only comes from a lifetime of privilege. Clean out your desk, he said, dismissing 11 years of flawless service with a wave of his hand. I placed my note on the conference table, watching his eyes barely glance at the simple message. You have 30 minutes, I said quietly, gathering my things. Derek assumed it was resignation drama. He had no idea I'd just activated a financial nuclear option. Walking back to my office, I felt the familiar weight of responsibility that had defined my career at Steinberg Financial Holdings. 11 years ago, I'd started here as a junior analyst, fresh from Northwestern University's finance program, armed with nothing but determination and a master's degree in financial mathematics. While other graduates chased flashy investment banking jobs, I saw opportunity in the methodical world of corporate treasury management. My rise hadn't been meteoric, but it had been steady and earned. Each promotion came through meticulous attention to detail and an almost supernatural ability to spot financial irregularities before they became problems. I remembered the night I discovered a $37 million discrepancy in overseas transfers that could have bankrupted a major client. My analysis saved not just their business, but cemented my reputation as someone who could be trusted with the company's most sensitive financial operations. The Treasury Department became my domain through years of building systems and relationships. I designed security protocols that other firms studied, implemented dual authorization processes that prevented fraud, and created reporting mechanisms that gave CEO William Steinberg unprecedented visibility into cash flow operations. My team of 12 specialized analysts looked to me not just as a supervisor, but as a mentor who genuinely cared about their professional development. Every morning, I arrived at 7:30 sharp to review overnight transactions from international markets. Steinberg Financial processed over $2 billion in various transactions daily, from routine payroll transfers to complex acquisition financing. My unique position required dual authorization codes for any transfer, exceeding $14 million, a responsibility that came with both power and incredible accountability. William Steinberg and I had developed a relationship built on mutual respect over the years. He valued my judgment on financial matters and often sought my input on major strategic decisions. Unlike his son, William understood that expertise couldn't be inherited or purchased. He'd grown the company from a regional bank to a major financial institution through careful decision-making and surrounding himself with competent professionals. Derek's return from Harvard Business School 2 years ago had shifted the office dynamics dramatically. Armed with an MBA and his father's last name, he'd been immediately granted a vice president position, despite having zero real-world experience. I'd initially tried to mentor him, sharing insights about the industry and introducing him to key clients. My efforts were met with condescension and barely concealed impatience. His attitude toward veteran employees became increasingly problematic as months passed. Derek seemed to view long-term staff as obstacles to his vision of modernization rather than valuable resources. He'd made dismissive comments about people who'd been with the company for decades, suggesting they lacked innovation and needed to embrace change or find new jobs. The real trouble began when Derek started pushing for what he called modernization initiatives. These weren't thoughtful improvements based on industry analysis, but rather attempts to bring in his fraternity friends for key positions regardless of their qualifications. His best friend, Jake Patterson, had graduated with a finance degree, but possessed none of the specialized knowledge required for Treasury operations. Recent months had revealed Derek's true intentions as he maneuvered to place Jake in increasingly sensitive roles. Jake had been given access to shadow other departments ostensibly to learn the business, but I recognized it as preparation for a more significant move. The writing became clear when Derek started questioning my methods and suggesting that Treasury operations needed fresh perspectives. The termination meeting had been choreographed with cruel precision. Derek waited until his father was traveling to Tokyo for an international banking conference, ensuring William would be unreachable during crucial business hours. He'd scheduled the meeting for late afternoon on a Friday, timing designed to minimize immediate fallout and give himself the weekend to implement changes. Sitting across from Derek in the conference room, I'd watched him savor the moment as he announced my termination. His justification was painfully transparent. Budget restructuring required eliminating redundant positions, and Jake's innovative approaches would streamline operations. The real motivation was obvious to anyone who understood Derek's character. He wanted to surround himself with loyal friends rather than competent professionals who might question his decisions. As he casually mentioned that Jake would be taking over immediately, Derek revealed the scope of his planning. This wasn't an impulsive decision, but a calculated coup that had been developing for months. Jake had already been briefed on basic procedures and given preliminary access to systems. Derek expected a seamless transition that would cement his control over the department. But Derek had made one critical miscalculation. In his arrogance, he'd forgotten that Treasury operations weren't just about processing paperwork. They required deep understanding of complex systems relationships with regulatory agencies, and most importantly, security protocols that I'd spent years developing and implementing. His assumption that anyone with a finance degree could step into my role would prove catastrophically wrong. The climactic revelation came when Derek smugly informed me that Jake would begin Monday morning with full authority over all Treasury operations. He'd already arranged for Jake to receive my access credentials and planned to announce the transition to major clients over the weekend. In Derek's mind, the matter was settled, and I was simply an obstacle being removed from his path to greater control. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt different this time, each second ticking toward a confrontation Derek couldn't imagine. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see him celebrating with Jake, probably detailing how smoothly the termination had gone. Their laughter carried down the hallway as I passed a sound that would haunt them both very soon. My office had been my sanctuary for over a decade, filled with industry awards, client appreciation letters, and photos from company events spanning my entire career. The mahogany desk held 3 computer monitors displaying real-time financial data from markets around the globe. None of that mattered now. What mattered was the secure terminal hidden behind a panel in my credenza, accessible only through biometric authentication that Derek didn't even know existed. 3 years ago, during a routine security upgrade, I'd proposed an emergency protocol to William Steinberg. Corporate espionage and internal theft had become increasingly sophisticated, requiring safeguards beyond traditional password protection. My solution was elegant in its simplicity. Critical transactions would require periodic biometric reauthorization from the Treasury Director during high-risk periods or emergency situations. William had given verbal approval for the protocol, trusting my judgment about technical implementation details. The system I created was far more comprehensive than he realized. Every transaction above $5 million would freeze automatically if my biometric signature wasn't refreshed every 30 minutes. The protocol could be activated remotely and would cascade through all subsidiary systems within the Steinberg financial network. I pressed my thumb to the hidden scanner, feeling the familiar slight warmth as it read my fingerprint. The screen displayed a simple question: activate emergency Treasury protocol. I selected yes and watched as lines of code scrolled past implementing changes that would reshape the company's entire financial landscape. The system requested confirmation for each major category: domestic transfers, international wires acquisition, funding, client disbursements, and regulatory reporting. 26 minutes remaining on my countdown. I moved systematically through my desk drawers, transferring critical authorization files to an encrypted external drive. These weren't just backup documents, but essential keys to understanding how our most complex transactions were structured. Without them, even experienced Treasury professionals would struggle to navigate our sophisticated financial instruments. My computer terminal displayed dozens of pending transactions scheduled for Monday morning processing, a $40 million acquisition payment for Riverside Manufacturing. Our biggest client sat in queue awaiting final authorization. European supplier payments totaling $63 million were scheduled for automatic processing at market opening overseas. These weren't theoretical numbers, but real obligations that would impact hundreds of businesses and thousands of employees. I opened my secure email system and began composing delayed delivery messages to key regulatory contacts. The Federal Reserve required daily reports on large transactions, and the Treasury Department expected weekly summaries of international transfers. Without my authorization codes, these reports would fail to generate triggering automatic compliance inquiries within days. 18 minutes left. My personal attorney, Sarah Mitchell, had been expecting this call for weeks. She'd watched Derek's maneuvering with professional interest, documenting his questionable decisions, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Sarah specialized in employment law and had built her reputation defending executives who faced wrongful termination or corporate retaliation. "It's happening," I said when she answered on the first ring. "Derek pulled the trigger this afternoon." "Did you activate their protocol?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and concern. 30 minutes and counting. The system will lock down every major transaction at 5:15 exactly. Sarah had helped me research the legal implications of the security protocol months ago. Since William had approved emergency measures and I'd implemented them within my authorized scope of responsibility, the lockdown couldn't be classified as sabotage or unauthorized access. I was simply executing a legitimate security procedure in response to personnel changes that compromised system integrity. 12 minutes remaining. Through my office window, I could see Derek and Jake moving toward the IT department, probably planning to familiarize Jake with the Treasury systems over the weekend. Thomas Crawford, our IT director, was a competent technician but lacked deep understanding of the financial protocols I'd implemented. He could maintain existing systems, but couldn't unravel the complex security measures I'd embedded throughout our network. I began changing my access codes and passwords, a process that required multiple authentication steps due to the sensitive nature of Treasury operations. Each system prompted for current credentials, biometric confirmation, and security questions before allowing modifications. The process was designed to prevent unauthorized access, but it also meant that my replacement would need extensive time and assistance to establish new authorization paths. My assistant, Janet Rodriguez, appeared in my doorway with a concerned expression. Janet had worked in Treasury operations for 7 years and understood the department's rhythms better than anyone. She'd noticed unusual activity on the department's main monitoring screens and had seen Derek's celebration in the conference room. "Several major clients have already called asking about delayed transfers," Janet said quietly. "The Morrison Group is expecting confirmation on their $28 million payment to overseas contractors. Pacific Development called twice about their acquisition funding." "What did you tell them?" I asked, continuing my systematic shutdown procedures. "That we were implementing routine security updates and would follow up Monday morning. But Lara, they seemed genuinely worried. The Morrison Group's CFO mentioned they'd already committed those funds to their contractors." 5 minutes left. Derek's celebration was about to become a catastrophe of his own making. I gathered my personal items into a small cardboard box, a few framed photos, my Northwestern University diploma, and a crystal paperweight William had given me after successfully managing the company's largest acquisition financing. The items felt insignificant compared to the knowledge and relationships I was walking away from. My secure terminal chimed softly, displaying a final confirmation request. Emergency Treasury protocol will activate in 4 minutes and 37 seconds. This action cannot be reversed without Treasury Director authorization. Proceed. I selected confirm and watched the countdown begin its final phase. The main Treasury monitoring screen showed normal operations continuing across all systems. International transfers processed smoothly, domestic payments flowed without interruption, and client accounts displayed healthy activity levels. In less than 5 minutes, that steady flow would stop, completely replaced by error messages requiring my personal authorization to resolve. I walked toward the elevator carrying my small box of belongings, feeling surprisingly calm despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Derek assumed he was removing an obstacle to his ambitions, but he'd actually triggered a financial crisis that would expose his incompetence to the entire company. The next few hours would determine whether Steinberg Financial Holdings survived his reckless decision-making. The elevator doors closed just as my watch showed 5:14. Somewhere above me, Derek was probably explaining his vision for Treasury modernization to Jake, completely unaware that in 60 seconds, every major financial operation in the company would grind to a halt. His arrogance had blinded him to the possibility that I might have anticipated this moment and prepared accordingly. The 30-minute deadline passed at exactly 5:15 on a Friday afternoon that would forever change Steinberg Financial Holdings. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage when every high-value transaction across the company's network froze simultaneously. Computer screens throughout the building displayed my custom message in stark red letters: authorization required, contact L. Harrison for emergency protocol resolution. Jake Patterson stared at his monitor in confusion as the $28 million payment to Morrison Group's European suppliers refused to process. He'd entered his temporary credentials exactly as Derek had instructed, but the system rejected every authorization attempt. Error codes he'd never seen before filled the screen, each one requiring clearance levels that didn't exist in any manual or training document. Derek burst into the Treasury Department 15 minutes after the lockdown began, his confident demeanor evaporating as he witnessed the scope of the crisis. Every workstation displayed similar error messages, and the main monitoring wall showed transaction queues backing up across all major account categories. The sophisticated dashboard I'd designed to track financial flows in real time had become a monument to his catastrophic miscalculation. "What's happening?" Derek demanded, his voice carrying a note of panic that his subordinates had never heard before. Jake fumbled with his temporary access card, sweat beading on his forehead as he tried to explain the inexplicable. "The system won't accept my authorization codes. Every transaction above $5 million is stuck in some kind of security hold. I can process smaller transfers, but everything major requires clearance from someone named L. Harrison." The realization hit Derek like a physical blow. L. Harrison was Laura Harrison, and she was no longer in the building. He'd assumed that terminating me would simply transfer my responsibilities to Jake, not understanding that Treasury operations required specialized knowledge and security clearances that couldn't be casually reassigned. Thomas Crawford, the IT director, arrived within minutes of Derek's emergency call. Thomas was a competent systems administrator who'd maintained the company's technical infrastructure for 8 years, but he'd never dealt with the sophisticated financial protocols that governed Treasury operations. His expression grew increasingly grim as he examined the error logs and authorization failures spreading across the network. "This is beyond my expertise," Thomas admitted after 20 minutes of unsuccessful troubleshooting attempts. "The security protocols are embedded deep in the financial systems, and they're designed to prevent exactly this kind of override attempt. We'd need specialized knowledge of Treasury operations to understand how to resolve these authorization failures." Derek's panic escalated as the implications became clear. Monday morning would bring dozens of major transactions that required processing before international markets opened. European suppliers expected payments Acquisition deals depended on timely funding transfers, and regulatory agencies required reports that couldn't generate without proper authorization codes. The company's reputation for reliability was dissolving with each passing minute. Client calls began flooding the customer service department within an hour of the lockdown. Morrison Group's CFO Patricia Williams called personally to express concern about their delayed payment to overseas contractors. The contractors had already purchased materials and committed resources based on confirmed funding schedules. Any delay would trigger penalty clauses and potentially jeopardize the entire project. Pacific Development's treasurer, Robert Chen, left increasingly urgent voicemails about their $90 million real estate closing scheduled for Monday morning. The transaction represented the largest commercial property acquisition in the company's history, and any delay would violate contractual obligations with multiple parties. Legal teams on both sides had spent months structuring the deal, and funding delays could unravel the entire arrangement. Derek attempted to reach his father multiple times, but William Steinberg remained unreachable at the International Banking Conference in Tokyo. The time difference meant that William was attending evening presentations when the crisis began, and emergency communications wouldn't reach him for several hours. Derek faced the terrifying prospect of managing a financial catastrophe without his father's guidance or authority. Emergency meetings convened throughout the evening as executives tried to comprehend the scope of the crisis. CFO Margaret Thompson arrived despite the late hour, her expression grave, as she reviewed the mounting list of delayed transactions. Head of Legal Robert Kim began researching potential liability exposure from contract violations and regulatory compliance failures. The IT department worked frantically to find override solutions, but their efforts revealed the sophisticated nature of my security implementation. Every attempted workaround triggered additional security protocols, creating cascading authentication failures that spread to previously unaffected systems. External consultants from Phoenix Digital Solutions arrived by Saturday morning, but estimated days or weeks to crack the embedded security measure. Jake's incompetence became glaringly obvious as the crisis deepened. He couldn't explain basic Treasury functions to concerned clients and lacked fundamental understanding of the regulatory requirements that governed our operations. His Harvard MBA hadn't prepared him for the practical realities of managing billions of dollars in daily transactions or maintaining relationships with demanding institutional clients. Saturday brought media attention as financial news outlets picked up reports about Steinberg Financial's mysterious transaction freeze. Bloomberg reported technical difficulties affecting major transfers, while Reuters quoted anonymous sources describing internal systems failures. The company's stock price began declining as investors questioned the stability of operations and management competence. Competitors immediately recognized the opportunity presented by Steinberg's crisis. First National Bank contacted several major clients, offering expedited account transfers and guaranteed processing for time-sensitive transactions. Regional banks began marketing their reliability compared to Steinberg's apparent technical instability. Decades of reputation building faced destruction within days. Sunday evening brought Derek's first communication from me since the crisis began. My attorney, Sarah Mitchell, delivered a formal letter outlining conditions for resolving the emergency protocol. The letter was professionally drafted, but carried an unmistakable message. I held all the cards in this confrontation, and Derek would need to acknowledge his mistakes before normal operations could resume. The letter specified that resolution discussions could begin Monday morning, contingent on Derek's willingness to address the personnel decisions that had triggered the crisis. No threats were made, no ultimatums delivered, but the implication was crystal clear. Derek had created this situation through arrogance and poor judgment, and only genuine accountability would restore the company's financial operations. As Sunday night ended, Derek faced a Monday morning with over $300 million in delayed transactions, angry clients threatening account closures, media scrutiny, questioning the company's competence, and no solution in sight. His attempt to consolidate power by removing me had instead exposed his fundamental ignorance about Treasury operations and created the largest crisis in Steinberg Financial's history. The sophisticated systems I'd built over 11 years had become a fortress, protecting the company's assets from unauthorized access. Derek had assumed that controlling personnel meant controlling operations, but he'd discovered that expertise and relationships couldn't be simply transferred through executive decisions. Monday would bring the reckoning he'd never anticipated. Monday morning arrived with Derek facing a boardroom filled with executives whose weekend had been consumed by crisis management calls. CFO Margaret Thompson's expression conveyed barely controlled fury as she presented the mounting damage assessment. 3 major clients had formally threatened to withdraw their accounts, representing over $600 million in assets under management. Riverside Manufacturing's board met yesterday in emergency session, Margaret reported, her voice tight with professional concern. They're questioning our stability and considering immediate account transfer to First National Bank. Pacific Development has already missed one acquisition deadline and faces penalty clauses that could cost them millions. Morrison Group's European contractors have filed formal complaints about payment delays. Derek attempted to maintain control of the narrative, but his explanations sounded increasingly desperate. He blamed outdated systems, suggested that modernization required temporary disruptions, and promised that new procedures would prevent future problems. The assembled executives weren't convinced by rhetoric when faced with quantifiable losses and regulatory exposure. Through my attorney, I presented specific conditions for resolving the emergency protocol. The terms weren't negotiable and addressed both immediate crisis resolution and long-term structural changes needed to prevent similar situations. Full reinstatement as Treasury Director with a guaranteed 5-year contract would ensure continuity and expertise retention. Jake's immediate removal from all financial operations would eliminate the unqualified personnel change that had triggered the crisis. A formal apology from Derek in front of the full executive team would acknowledge his poor judgment and demonstrate accountability for the consequences. Implementation of anti-nepotism policies would prevent future hiring decisions based on personal relationships rather than professional qualifications. Substantial raise and bonus compensation would reflect my increased value to the organization and compensate for the stress and reputational damage caused by Derek's actions. Derek's initial response was predictable and counterproductive. Rather than acknowledging his mistakes, he doubled down on his authority and hired Phoenix Digital Solutions at enormous expense. The cybersecurity firm's reputation for cracking complex systems gave Derek false confidence that technological solutions could overcome the personnel problems he'd created. His decision to frame the situation as sabotage and corporate espionage revealed fundamental misunderstanding of both legal and technical realities. He threatened criminal charges against me, contacted law enforcement agencies, and attempted to freeze my benefits and retirement accounts. These aggressive tactics backfired spectacularly as they attracted additional media attention and regulatory scrutiny. Several department heads privately expressed support for my position, recognizing that Derek's management style had created a toxic environment throughout the organization. CFO Margaret Thompson had witnessed Derek's dismissive treatment of experienced staff and his tendency to make decisions without consulting subject matter experts. Her observations would prove crucial as the crisis escalated. Head of Legal Robert Kim warned Derek about potential wrongful termination lawsuits, pointing out that my personnel file contained 11 years of exceptional performance reviews and client commendations. The absence of documented performance problems or disciplinary actions would make any termination difficult to justify in court. Derek's stated reasons for the termination focused on budget constraints and modernization needs, but the timing and circumstances suggested discriminatory intent. Senior VP Patricia Walsh had faced Derek's inappropriate behavior personally and had documented several instances of gender-based discrimination and harassment. Her willingness to support my position reflected broader organizational concerns about Derek's fitness for leadership. The crisis had revealed character flaws that extended beyond poor business judgment into ethical and legal violations. Monday afternoon brought the first major client defection as Riverside Manufacturing's board voted unanimously to transfer their account to First National Bank. Their public statement cited concerns about Steinberg Financial's operational instability and management competence. The loss represented not just immediate revenue, but damage to the company's reputation for reliability and professionalism. CEO David Chen of Riverside Manufacturing had worked with me personally on complex financing arrangements over several years. His decision to leave reflected confidence in my abilities and skepticism about Derek's leadership. The public nature of his criticism sent shockwaves through the financial community and prompted other clients to reevaluate their relationships with Steinberg Financial. Phoenix Digital Solutions worked around the clock but made little progress against my security protocols. Dr. Amanda Foster, their lead consultant, privately informed Derek that my implementation was expertly crafted and legally compliant with all regulatory requirements. Her professional assessment contradicted Derek's sabotage claims and suggested that forced system overrides could cause permanent damage to financial data integrity. Tuesday brought escalating pressure as additional clients announced account reviews and media coverage intensified. The Wall Street Journal published an investigative article about family business dynamics and nepotism in financial services using Steinberg Financial as a case study. Derek's hiring of unqualified friends and dismissal of experienced professionals became a cautionary tale about corporate governance failures. Derek's desperation reached new heights as he considered meeting my demands but couldn't overcome his pride and admit public defeat. His father remained unreachable at the extended international conference, leaving Derek to face the crisis without guidance or authority. Every passing hour brought additional damage to the company's reputation and financial stability. Wednesday evening brought the breakthrough that would change everything. My attorney received a secure satellite communication from CEO William Steinberg, who had finally learned about the crisis through emergency corporate channels. His message was brief but decisive. He was cutting short his Tokyo conference and flying back immediately to address the situation personally. The revelation that William had been briefed on all crisis details during his flight home added a new dimension to the confrontation. Derek's assumption that he could resolve the situation before his father's return had been completely wrong. William possessed full knowledge of Derek's decisions, the resulting consequences, and my conditions for resolution. The power dynamics were about to shift dramatically. Thursday morning found Derek in an impossible position as he awaited his father's arrival. The crisis had exposed every weakness in his character and judgment while demonstrating my indispensability to the organization's operations. His attempt to consolidate power had instead revealed his fundamental incompetence and created the largest financial emergency in the company's history. The sophisticated security protocols I'd implemented were functioning exactly as designed, protecting the company's assets from unauthorized access while maintaining complete legal compliance. Derek's assumption that authority could override expertise had proven catastrophically wrong, and his father's imminent return would bring accountability that Derek had spent his entire life avoiding. William Steinberg's private jet touched down at O'Hare Airport Thursday afternoon to find his company under siege. News vans crowded the corporate headquarters plaza. Financial reporters broadcast live updates about the ongoing crisis, and the stock price had dropped 18% since Monday morning. The carefully built reputation of Steinberg Financial Holdings faced destruction through his son's reckless decision-making. The emergency executive meeting convened within an hour of William's arrival. Derek had spent days preparing his explanation. crafting a narrative that positioned me as a disgruntled saboteur who had damaged the company out of personal spite. He presented elaborate charts showing modernization benefits and efficiency improvements that would result from streamlined Treasury operations under Jake's leadership. William listened to his son's presentation without interruption, his expression revealing nothing about his thoughts or intentions. Decades of business experience had taught him to gather complete information before making crucial decisions, and Derek's version of events would be only the beginning of his investigation. CFO Margaret Thompson's presentation provided a starkly different perspective on the crisis. Her documentation showed that Derek's poor decisions over 2 years had created mounting problems throughout the organization. Client complaints specifically mentioned Derek's handling of accounts with several major customers, expressing concerns about his competence and professionalism. Derek promised the Morrison Group that his innovative approaches would reduce processing time for complex transactions, Margaret explained, referencing detailed client communications. Instead, his interference with established procedures created delays and confusion that nearly cost us their business even before this crisis began. The evidence continued mounting as department heads shared their experiences with Derek's leadership style. Customer Services Director presented records showing increasing complaint rates correlating directly with Derek's involvement in client relationships. His tendency to overpromise and underdeliver had strained relationships that I had carefully cultivated over years of consistent performance. HR Director Rachel Green's presentation revealed multiple harassment complaints filed against Derek by female employees. The documented incidents painted a pattern of discriminatory behavior that extended far beyond poor business judgment into potential legal liability. Derek's treatment of experienced female staff members reflected attitudes that had no place in modern corporate environments. 3 different employees have filed formal complaints about Derek's comments regarding their appearance and qualifications. Rachel reported her voice professional but firm. He's made statements suggesting that certain positions were better suited for men and that women couldn't handle the stress of high-level financial operations. Williams' investigation deepened as the meeting progressed, revealing the full scope of Derek's deception and incompetence. The modernization initiatives Derek had promoted were largely superficial changes designed to justify bringing in unqualified friends rather than genuine improvements to operational efficiency. Jake's appointment violated standard hiring protocols and board approval requirements for sensitive positions. Derek had bypassed security clearance procedures that were federally mandated for Treasury operations, assuming his authority could override regulatory requirements. His casual disregard for compliance obligations created potential legal exposure that extended beyond internal personnel matters into governmental oversight and enforcement actions. The revelation about Derek and Jake's long-term intentions emerged through Williams' systematic questioning of other executives. Senior VP Patricia Walsh had overheard conversations between Derek and Jake about eventually establishing their own financial consulting firm using client connections and proprietary systems developed at Steinberg Financial. Jake's appointment represented the first step in a gradual takeover attempt that would have stripped valuable assets from the company. Derek told Jake that they could build client relationships here and then offer specialized services through their own firm. Patricia testified her notes providing specific dates and locations for these conversations. They discussed taking key accounts with them and using Steinberg's resources to establish their competitive position. The private father-son confrontation that followed revealed years of accumulated tension and disappointment. William had given Derek multiple opportunities to prove himself, but each chance had been squandered through arrogance and poor judgment. Derek's sense of entitlement had blinded him to the earned respect and expertise that drove successful business relationships. "I've watched you dismiss every piece of advice from experienced professionals," William said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "You've treated this company like your personal playground, instead of understanding that success requires competence and accountability. Derek's attempt to shift blame to outdated systems and resistant employees fell flat against the evidence of his systematic failures. His father had built Steinberg Financial through careful decision-making and surrounding himself with qualified professionals principles that Derek had consistently violated through his hiring and management practices. The family dynamics underlying the crisis reflected broader questions about succession planning and merit-based leadership. William had hoped that Derek would develop the character and competence needed to eventually lead the company, but Derek's behavior had demonstrated fundamental unsuitability for executive responsibility. Derek's final desperate gambit involved threatening to sue his own father and expose supposed family business secrets to financial media outlets. The threats reflected his complete misunderstanding of corporate governance and legal oversight that govern publicly traded companies. Every significant decision had been documented and board approved through proper procedures. Every transaction, every policy change, every personnel decision has been legally documented and approved through appropriate channels. William responded calmly to his son's threats. If you want to create additional public embarrassment for yourself, you're free to try. The climactic revelation that transformed the entire crisis came when William explained his long-term strategic planning. He had been secretly grooming me as a potential successor, recognizing that my integrity and expertise represented the company's future leadership needs. My systematic development of advanced security protocols and client relationships had impressed William as evidence of executive potential. Derek's firing of me wasn't just a tactical mistake, but a direct betrayal of his father's carefully developed succession plans. The emergency protocol I'd activated had actually protected the company's assets and demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking that William valued in future leaders. Lara represents everything this company needs to succeed in the future. William concluded his disappointment in Derek evident to everyone present. Your decision to fire her revealed that you understand nothing about leadership competence or the values that built this organization. The boardroom fell silent as the implications became clear. Derek's attempt to consolidate power had instead demonstrated his complete unfitness for authority, while my crisis management had showcased the strategic thinking and protective instincts needed for executive leadership. The power dynamics had shifted irreversibly, and Derek's future at the company hung in the balance. William Steinberg's personal call reached me Friday morning as I sat in my home office, monitoring financial news coverage of the ongoing crisis. His voice carried a weariness I'd never heard before, the exhaustion of a leader who had discovered that his own son posed the greatest threat to everything he'd built over decades. Lara, I owe you a profound apology. William began his words carefully chosen but deeply felt. Derek's behavior has been inexcusable, and the crisis he created could have destroyed this company. I need to understand what happened and how we can move forward together. The request for a face-to-face meeting represented more than crisis management. It signaled William's recognition that fundamental changes were needed throughout the organization. I agreed to meet at his private office Saturday morning with my attorney present to ensure that all discussions were properly documented and legally protected. The negotiation took place in William's corner office overlooking downtown Chicago, the same space where I'd received my first promotion 7 years earlier. The mahogany conference table had witnessed countless strategic decisions, but none as significant as the conversation that would reshape Steinberg Financial's future leadership structure. William listened intently as I explained the emergency protocol's design and implementation. The security measures weren't punitive but protective, designed to prevent exactly the kind of internal threat that Derek's actions represented. The system could be restored immediately with my authorization, but long-term security required personnel changes that addressed the root causes of the crisis. Your protocol saved us from potentially catastrophic exposure. William acknowledged reviewing documentation that outlined the sophisticated safeguards I'd embedded throughout the financial systems. If Derek and Jake had gained unrestricted access to Treasury operations, they could have compromised client assets and regulatory compliance in ways that would have taken years to repair. The terms William offered exceeded even my attorney's expectations. Promotion to Senior Vice President of Treasury Operations would provide executive level authority and recognition for my contributions to the company's success. Equity shares would align my interests with long term organizational performance and provide significant financial upside as the company recovered and grew. Derek's removal from his vice president position was immediate and non negotiable. The board of directors voted unanimously to terminate his employment, citing gross misconduct and violations of fiduciary responsibility. Jake Patterson was escorted from the building by security personnel, his access to company systems permanently revoked. The investigation into Derek's unauthorized access to confidential client information revealed the scope of his planned betrayal. Computer forensics experts found evidence that Derek had downloaded sensitive financial data and client contact lists, presumably for use in the competing firm he and Jake intended to establish. These actions constituted potential criminal violations that extended beyond employment termination into federal prosecution territory. System restoration took place with multiple witnesses present, including board members, legal counsel, and regulatory observers who had been monitoring the crisis. I input my biometric authorization while cameras recorded every step for legal documentation. The moment my credentials were accepted, pending transactions worth over $300 million began processing immediately. The technical elegance of the restoration surprised even experienced financial professionals who witnessed the procedure. Years of careful planning had created seamless integration between security protocols and operational requirements, allowing normal functions to resume without data loss or processing errors. The crisis had actually demonstrated the robustness of systems that many observers had previously taken for granted. Client recovery efforts began immediately as William and I personally contacted each affected customer to explain the crisis resolution and Derek's permanent removal. Many clients expressed relief that I had returned to my position, citing confidence in my technical expertise and professional integrity. Several customers who had considered leaving decided to maintain their relationships based on renewed confidence in management stability. Riverside Manufacturing's CEO David Chen agreed to reconsider his account transfer decision after extensive discussions about enhanced security measures and improved client communication protocols. His willingness to give Steinberg Financial another chance reflected both personal relationships and recognition that the crisis had actually strengthened our operational safeguards. Media management became crucial as news outlets sought to understand the rapid resolution of what had appeared to be an intractable technical crisis. The company's public relations team framed the situation as proactive security measures that had prevented potential breaches rather than internal management failures. My role was positioned as heroic protection of client assets rather than corporate conflict. Derek's final humiliation played out publicly as security personnel escorted him from the building while employees watched from office windows. His company vehicle, corporate credit cards, and executive parking privileges were immediately revoked. The dramatic fall from privileged executive to terminated employee served as a powerful reminder about the consequences of arrogance and poor judgment. The broader family implications extended beyond immediate employment consequences as William's siblings who served on the board of directors expressed complete support for Derek's removal. His behavior had embarrassed the family name and violated the principles of integrity and competence that had built the company's reputation over generations. 3 competing financial firms attempted to recruit me during the crisis resolution period, offering salary packages that exceeded my new compensation at Steinberg Financial. The opportunity to leave and start fresh was tempting, but My commitment to the institution and confidence in William's leadership convinced me to stay and continue building what we'd started together. The most satisfying revelation came when I disclosed to William and the board the complete documentation I'd maintained of Derek's plans to steal client information and establish a competing firm. Federal financial regulators received copies of all evidence ensuring that Derek would face appropriate consequences for his attempted corporate espionage. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Derek's attempted consulting firm had failed to secure even a single client, his reputation in the financial industry permanently damaged by reports of his termination and the circumstances surrounding it. He eventually accepted a junior position at a small regional bank in another state, his executive aspirations permanently diminished. My expanded role as senior vice president had exceeded even optimistic expectations. The Treasury team grew to 22 specialists, the largest department in company history, reflecting the increased importance of sophisticated financial management in the modern economy. Industry publications featured articles about our innovative security protocols, establishing Steinberg Financial as a thought leader in financial risk management. The crisis had ultimately strengthened the company in ways that normal business operations could never have achieved. Client confidence reached new heights based on demonstrated crisis management capabilities and commitment to protecting their interests above internal politics. The stock price recovered completely and reached near all-time highs as investors recognized the improved management structure and operational safeguards. 6 months after Derek's dramatic departure, I stood in my new corner office on the 17th floor watching the Chicago skyline transform in the golden light of early morning. The view from Senior Vice President of Treasury Operations included not just the city I'd called home for over a decade, but a perspective on leadership and professional growth that would have been impossible to imagine during those tense moments when Derek announced my termination. The transformation extended far beyond personal vindication into institutional change that would benefit Steinberg Financial Holdings for generations. My Treasury team had expanded to 22 specialists, each bringing unique expertise in different aspects of financial management. The department had become a destination for top talent from across the industry, with professionals specifically requesting to work under my leadership and contribute to our innovative approaches. Industry recognition followed naturally from our enhanced capabilities and proven crisis management skills. The American Institute of Treasury Management invited me to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference, where I spoke about integrity in corporate leadership and the importance of merit-based decision-making. Business schools incorporated our crisis management case study into their curricula, using Derek's failure as a cautionary tale about nepotism and entitlement. My testimony before congressional committees about financial cybersecurity had elevated both personal and company profiles within regulatory circles. The security protocols I'd developed were being studied by federal agencies as potential models for industry-wide implementation. The emergency measures that had once seemed like desperate defensive tactics were now recognized as forward-thinking safeguards that protected not just individual companies, but systemic financial stability. The personal growth that emerged from surviving and thriving through the crisis had deepened my understanding of leadership principles that extended beyond technical expertise into character and courage. Standing up for my principles despite initial fear and uncertainty had led to the most rewarding period of my professional career. The experience taught me that expertise and integrity ultimately triumph over privilege and entitlement when given the chance to prove themselves. Derek's aftermath served as a powerful reminder about the consequences of poor character and judgment. His attempted consulting firm had collapsed within 3 months when potential clients learned about the circumstances of his departure from Steinberg Financial. The financial industry's close-knit professional networks ensured that his reputation for dishonesty and incompetence followed him to every opportunity. His eventual position at a small regional bank reflected the dramatic fall from his earlier executive aspirations. Former colleagues reported that Derek struggled with basic responsibilities and continued to blame others for his failures. The entitled attitude that had caused his downfall remained unchanged, ensuring that his career prospects would remain permanently limited. William Steinberg's decision to promote me into executive leadership had proven prescient as the company achieved record performance under a collaborative management approach. His willingness to acknowledge his son's failures and prioritize institutional success over family loyalty had strengthened rather than weakened the company's foundation. Board members frequently commented about the improved strategic decision-making and operational excellence that characterized our partnership. The anti-nepotism policies implemented after Derek's termination had created a more dynamic and competitive environment throughout the organization. Merit-based hiring and promotion ensured that the most qualified candidates advanced regardless of personal connections or family relationships. Employee satisfaction surveys showed dramatic improvement as staff members recognized that competence and contribution were valued above political considerations. New mentorship programs allowed me to share knowledge and experience with rising professionals who reminded me of myself at earlier career stages. Young women particularly benefited from seeing executive leadership that had been earned through expertise rather than inherited through family connections. Their enthusiasm and fresh perspectives enriched our department's culture and enhanced our innovative capabilities. The company's transformation extended beyond internal operations into market leadership and industry influence. Competitors studied our security protocols and crisis management procedures, trying to understand how we'd turned potential catastrophe into competitive advantage. Client relationships had deepened through demonstrated commitment to protecting their interests above internal politics and personal ambitions. Stock performance reflected investor confidence in our improved governance and operational capabilities. The crisis that had initially threatened the company's survival had ultimately demonstrated management quality and institutional resilience that attracted new investment and partnership opportunities. Financial analysts frequently cited Steinberg Financial as an example of effective crisis management and strategic leadership development. My platform as a recognized industry leader created opportunities to advocate for broader changes in corporate culture and workplace equality. Speaking engagements allowed me to share insights about the importance of diverse perspectives in executive decision-making and the dangers of homogeneous leadership teams that lack accountability and oversight. The deeper lessons from our experience resonated far beyond individual career advancement into questions about meritocracy, integrity, and courage in professional environments. True power emerged from competence and preparation, rather than inherited privilege or political maneuvering. My willingness to take calculated risks based on principles and expertise had protected not just my career, but the entire organization and its stakeholders. The sophisticated emergency protocols that had once seemed like desperate defensive measures were now recognized as strategic planning that anticipated and prevented potential threats. The crisis had validated years of careful preparation and demonstrated that expertise backed by courage could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Looking back on that Friday afternoon when Derek announced my termination, I realized that his arrogance had actually created the opportunity for positive change that might never have emerged through normal business operations. His attempt to remove competent leadership had instead exposed the importance of merit-based decision-making and accelerated my advancement into roles where I could make even greater contributions. The experience taught me that workplace challenges, even those that seem devastating in the moment, can become catalysts for growth and positive change when approached with strategic thinking and unwavering principles. My story represented something larger about the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the immediate consequences seem overwhelming. As I reflected on the journey from that dramatic confrontation to my current position of influence and respect, I understood that the most meaningful victories come not from defeating opponents, but from building something better than what existed before. Derek's failure had created space for institutional improvement that would benefit countless employees, clients, and stakeholders for years to come. The morning sun continued its rise over Chicago, illuminating a city filled with professionals facing their own challenges and opportunities. My story had become proof that competence, integrity, and courage could triumph over entitlement and privilege when given the chance to prove themselves. The foundation we'd built was stronger than anything Derek could have destroyed, and the future held unlimited potential for continued growth and positive impact. Have you ever faced a situation where someone tried to use their position or connections to unfairly undermine your hard work and expertise? How did you handle it? And what lessons did you learn from standing up for yourself? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to show your support for workplace integrity and merit-based leadership. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about overcoming professional challenges and building successful careers through competence and character. Share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of preparation principles and strategic thinking in the face of adversity. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and remember that your expertise and integrity are your most powerful tools for creating positive change in any situation. May you find the courage to stand up for what's right and the wisdom to turn challenges into opportunities for growth and success.